Hello, and welcome to the Essential Libertarians, giving you the tools for self-governance. I'm your host, Freemasons, and today I'm joined by my amazing co-host, Daniel Petro, along with two special guests, Eric Cox and Aaron Joyce of the Irish Freedom Party. How's everybody doing?
I am pretty good.
Doing great, Kareem.
Awesome. Let us do this. One thing I'm definitely going to say is super excited for tonight's discussion because we have a lot of really, really interesting topics to hit. So this should be a really good one. That being said, if you want to keep the ideals of Ron Paul alive, if you want to keep Murray Rothbard's vision going, then take a look at the Mises Caucus. Our policy is simple. No more wars, no more lockdowns, no more mandates, no more bailouts. Freedom works if you give it a chance. You can take a look at our resources here. If you're interested, go ahead, put your information, and join the revolution. Join the decentralized revolution today at lpmisescaucus.com. So I just kind of wanted to, start our discussion with something that a lot of people probably already know, is that Kyle Rittenhouse got acquitted of all charges. I thought he was actually going to get hit with a gun charge. I was wrong, and I'll admit that. I personally think there's a few things to look at, though, and I'm not going to spend tons and tons of time on this, but I think a couple things are important. One is that this was more than just Kyle Rittenhouse. People are like, well, okay, fine, I don't really care about Kyle, and whether you do or not, I think it's important to realize that this is more about you being able to defend yourself against people who may have a ideology that you don't like. Like if somebody's attacking you from the left, say someone, Antifa or someone who has neoliberal views, can they just get away with it? And apparently some judges are stepping up and saying no. The other thing that I think is important to realize is that a 17-year-old kid, whether he went to defend or not, I don't think we want to have a society where people are being thrown into this position. So we really need to fix things. And last but not least, I think another point to take a look at is that the Ghislaine Maxwell case is coming up, and a lot of elites are probably like panicking. So like Eric, you were saying before we got into the show, maybe they're just throwing this out there to be like, okay, Kyle's free. Like, hey, you got to win. Woohoo, liberty. Don't look at this, whatever you do, because I feel the elites probably would even say, okay, please do not look like, we'll let Kyle free, but do not look at, don't mention Ghislaine Maxwell. Don't talk about it. We don't want to talk about her. We don't want to talk about Epstein. Even when the mainstream media asked Bill Gates, like, what was your relationship with Epstein? Did you hang out with him? He's like, well, we had dinner once and it was pretty good. So
yeah, it was obvious that he was lying and being deceptive in his speech. But one thing I want to ask you, Kareem, and I want to ask everyone here, is one thing that I think is that needs to be specified, because people will use it against us, or at least me, right? Because when you're a speaker and when you want to inform people and even persuade people, not that we're trying to persuade anyone, but we're trying to be objective. If you don't define things, people will fill those definitions for you. So one thing I'll ask you, Kareem, and everyone else, what exactly is when you say the elites? What are the elites? Who are they? And like, where exactly are they located? Just for my audience.
Okay. The elites is generally a broad term to talk about people who have acquired a high position in society, either due to influence, due to the accumulation of Federal Reserve notes or the native notes of their country, land, resources, and maybe even other types of capital. And a lot of elites have different competing purposes, so I'm not saying they're all the same. However, what they do is, when you're not looking at what
Hello?
I think we lost them.
Damn it, Kareem. All right, I'll take over for Kareem. I am now.
Oh, he's back.
Telling them what to do. So I don't have like a hard like dictionary definition of the elites, but the people who control the politicians, with the resources they've acquired at the upper
Okay.
echelons of society. Where they're
So it's-
located, everywhere. It's not like one. People try and say it's one place, like it's just Washington, it's just Rockefeller, it's just this guy. No, they're everywhere, man. It's not like they're just hanging out at one. Like this is the elites club. There's Bilderberg, there's CFR. They're everywhere.
So I'm going to let everyone else give their input, but I just want to clarify what you said. So basically, the elites are not people who are necessarily wealthy, who are necessarily rich, or who necessarily hold certain positions of authority. It's people who have accumulated wealth in maybe a nefarious way and have risen to a level in society to where they've used their power and they impose their will on others. So it's not their money that makes them an elite. It's a combination of their status and their malevolence. And also I want to touch on, they're not located in any one place. Elites it's a non-local thing where there's no certain place where elites propagate themselves, but they're everywhere. And there's different types of elites. It's not just like there's only political elites. It's like, so the basic definition that you would probably be saying is those who rise to power, use their power for bad, and while doing so, hurt others and lack a sort of morality and ethics in their way of doing that.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. Because people can get in discussions about this elite and that elite, and I've even seen things like it's all the Bilderbergers, it's all the the Freemasons are a fun one. Like, oh, it's all the I'm like, dude, it's not just Freemasons. Like, it's a ton.
Let me touch on the Freemason. I have an experience with Freemasons. My father is a Freemason, and I think there's a lot of negative views on the Freemasons, when in reality the Masons themselves are a group of individuals, and one of the two main things to become a Mason is you have to believe in a higher power and you have to be a man, right? At least at your level, your local level of your Mason meeting houses, it's only really to help each other out. They're really more on the point. I usually argue when people like to go through that the Masons are part of the elites. I don't think they are at all. I think a lot of people who have networked and a lot of people who are elites have networked within the Masons. However, the organization themselves is the Masons. That themselves isn't anything nefarious or anything elitist per se.
I agree.
So what you're saying is, like, there's this organization, which, by the way, I think I want to clarify, is a very, very ancient organization. It's very, very old. It's historical, is not necessarily in itself nefarious, but maybe there's actors who were a part of the Freemasons, which by what you're saying, it almost sounds like a men's club, like a boys' club.
It basically is
religious boys' club, right? Where you all have to believe in God and you have certain, universal morals that you share. But other people in government, in power, have maybe combined forces with some people within the Freemasonry. But the whole organization as a whole isn't like inherently evil, right?
No, that's exactly. I agree with what you just said. Yes,
I agree with you. Yeah, because from my understanding, there's 33rd degrees. The highest is to understand natural law, the generative principle of care, which is what the G in the compass stands for. And George Washington was a Mason. I'm not a huge fan of the lodge system, I will say, from what I can understand, but maybe I'm wrong because I don't go to those meetings. I do my spiritual thing at home here. So that's just my opinion. It is inherently a good thing, but there are people who network and use it to get, just like any organization, like anything, any religion you could use, they use it to get favors. So, yeah. Yeah, I'm not criticizing any one group or person. And there's religious deep staters or elites too.
100%.
You've gone into a very interesting topic for me now, Harry.
What Aaron, I want to ask you a question. And because you're the only one here who's in Europe, maybe other people in this chat have been. Sadly, I haven't. But you've been here for a very, very long time. I don't know how far It's from the United States, but pretty damn far, right? You're basically in a different world, or at least a different part of the world where things are dramatically different in a lot of ways. So what I'm very curious, in Ireland, what are some of the sort of corrupt like organizations, aspects of your government, groups like he was just saying, the Freemasonry, and you have certain things like the CFR here, which is somewhat global. But like, I would talk about the corrupt and nefarious institutions and organizations in Ireland, because I'm really curious, and I'm sure everyone else is like, what are those things, and are they similar? Or are they different?
Well, I'm sure, like all, Danny, that's a great question. But I'm sure, like all, or most, or unfortunately some, is the way I'll go about it, countries in the world at the moment, their biggest culprit of corruption is their government. And that is ours. The biggest organization, or the biggest culprits of probably corruption in our country, is our very own government. I was fascinated.
What a surprise. There. I'm shocked.
Yes, no surprise. But I was fascinated listening there. And I wouldn't mean to insult, or I certainly don't intend to, anybody. But I was listening to three individuals speak there in relation to Freemasons, and certainly Eric, as a family member, I acknowledge that a Mason. I have two very good, close friends of mine in life that I've grown up with that are Masons. One of which actually is no longer one, but that's here nor there. Ye all three gave my ears what I'm used to listening to about Masons. What I'm used to listening to about Masons. Everyone will blindly say there's 33 degrees of level is exactly what Eric said. I will reiterate what I just said. At a low level, or at a local level, what they do is literally exactly what Eric said. They would be very charitable, or they would be organized like that. And I don't want to, this is not turning into a stab at the Masons at all. But I'm certainly a lot more skeptical about what I'm hearing and what I've just heard regarding the Masons there. They are a group, guys, that have lodges in a very, 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 very large amount of countries, and probably in a lot of places in those countries, i.e. a pocket in every society. That does not happen at an easy level. And there's levels like structure, organization, and discipline that come into that. And I'm sure there's other organizations, like I say, we're not going to pick on the Freemasons, there's plenty more. But I'd have a lot more questions in and around their operations. In Ireland, you would be able to trace back, for example, and I'll prove my point. In Ireland, you would be able to trace back business organizations, or indeed operations of large transfers of money, investments, things like this. You're going to come across some names that will be connected with groups and organizations where it comes to be too many coincidences not to look. Let's put it that way. I'm sure that happens in America as well. But in Ireland, to answer Daniel's direct question, the biggest culprits of corruption in Ireland are the government. You did mention the Masons, though. You would hear a lot of activist groups or people's movements have turned very much so to speaking out or against Masons or other groups like them, i.e. even political parties to a degree, lads, are getting an absolute battering in Ireland. Because anything that's not transparent, if you have a secret society or you have a group that meet in secret, well then in all seriousness, that is not a democracy really, is it? To be fair, if you have 80, 90, 900, 1,000, 2,000, you know where I'm going, doesn't matter how many, but then they're making decisions, making rules, contributing to community or to national organizations and national developments or policy a lot more than others. This helps when you're in a party or when you're in an organization, that you're able to discuss all of these things. This is becoming a very big topic in Ireland because you have young people like me, I suppose, and even me, I can speak for myself, who had no interest in politics. You have people now, because of COVID-19, I suppose, looking a lot more at politics. And forgive me for saying this, I don't mean that I empathize with everyone who's suffered from this pandemic, but I see that COVID-19 as a slight little bit of a blessing for Ireland on that front, on the front that it's waking up people politically that were not awake, or maybe shedding light on parts of the government or on problems that were existing before COVID, but they are now tenfold. And I can speak for other countries on that as well, but guys, I don't want to hog the mic, and I'd like to hear some of your opinions on what I've stated thus far. I could talk on, guys, I just don't want to, you know. But they are the biggest organizations being questioned here are our very own government, and unfortunately, you have mentioned Freemasons, but I would go along the lines of saying other similar groups like that are being talked about a lot in Ireland, and indeed political parties, for the very reasons and their organization and operations. That's it.
Yeah, no, I love that point, actually, because you can look at COVID in two ways. You can look, it's bad, it destroyed businesses, lives, and a lot of people, and that is definitely a fact, and I'm not overlooking that. But I do think at some fundamental level, some awakening had to happen where people had to be shown, like, look, this is what your government is. They weren't just going to wake up kind of one day like, you know, I'm going to the office, and all of a sudden I see that, you know, they're evil or nefarious. Which, speaking of that, speaking of elites, speaking of all this craziness, it brings me into my first topic. I don't know if you guys seen, I know me and Daniel have. I was watching We Are Changed the other day, and he does an intro. The intro kind of got me off guard because I was looking for like Kyle Rittenhouse stuff. And then all of a sudden, Hillary Clinton says cryptocurrency has the potential to destabilize nations and traditional currency. I'm like...
I mean, you got to give her some credit on that one. That takes balls. I mean,
yeah.
What she means. Okay, I'm going to help Hillary out, and I'm going to tell you exactly what she means.
Help Hillary.
And I'm being serious. I'm going to translate for her. What she's saying is that because cryptocurrency is arguably, especially Bitcoin, just talking Bitcoin here, is one of the most efficient, well-constructed currencies that is a hard currency, that is a store in value, and that is a finite currency / coin, that it's more not only reliable, but it's more influential, and it's damn sure it's easier to persuade peoples of countries. So what does that mean? That means that people who are on a fiat standard and have been suffering from fiat symptoms are now going to see this currency, which is 10 times more efficient, and you can do things with it without it being tracked or traced by the government. It's freedom in a capsule. That's what it is. It should be called freedom currency. And because that is the case, well, that's going to take away from the power of the government. So it's really going to destabilize the government and destabilize different Federal Reserves and economic institutions. That's what she means. It's going to hurt her and her colleagues.
Yeah, which to me, I was almost like, because funny enough, I don't know if you guys know, I don't know if I used to, back in the early days of crypto, do white papers, and I reviewed ICOs, and I would tell people all these it does this as this blockchain, you can do these transfers, it's going to rise in value, it's really good. And people are like, yeah, cool. And then Hillary says this, I'm like, hey, if you need an endorsement now, like, I'll throw my Coinbase link out there. This is actually, funny enough, even though she's not a fan and hates cryptocurrency and knows that it'll undermine everything her and her cronies doing, I think it's kind of funny she said that, because to me, if I'm minarchist, classical liberal, or anarchist oriented, which everybody knows my position, then to me this is pretty good endorsement.
Can we show the clip of her, the whole clip that I sent you?
We definitely can.
Yeah, can. Dude, it's
yeah.
It looks like a boomer talking about Bitcoin.
Yeah.
One thing I like about another country in the world with crypto is, I don't know if y'all saw what El Salvador did.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
And to me, that speaks numbers that at least some countries are showing, like, because, I mean, we can see it in countries like Venezuela. We can see it in countries like Cuba, where their dollar, their currency is not stable, and the government controls the value of it. It's not really, it's better for it to be controlled by the people who use it, in my opinion. It
comes down to a simple proposition. When there's a printer with infinite batteries and power, why not use it? Right? Yeah. If there's a printer that can be used, and it can be used whenever anyone who has the authority to use it, they can use it. Well, then not only does printing become like normalized, but why not print when there's an economic crisis? Boom. Especially if you're under the idea and you're under your presupposition is that printing any amount of money will not have a certain amount of consequences or opportunity cost, which is if you're for the modern monetary theory, then that would be the case. But that's all good for you and whatever you are. But at the end of the day, whether you believe the consequences or not, they'll happen. Your coin will devalue. Your currency will literally destabilize, and it will get very bad, and it will affect the middle class. But as almost every country, guess what? The majority of the economy, which recently in America was actually surpassed by the 1% in America, which is something to be said. But up until literally within the last 2 months, the middle class has always dominated the economy, right? But forget the wealth, like purely monetary side of it. They are responsible for a large portion of the production of raw resources in this country as well. So it would be in your best interest, even if you're a crony, corrupt, corporatist, governor, president, whatever it is, to have a currency which would lead to more people working, for more people to produce more resources, because those resources are not just going to the poor, but also the rich. So from a economical standpoint and a societal standpoint, it's forcing totalitarian regimes, not that El Salvador is, I'm just saying, it will force totalitarian regimes to either adopt it or fall behind. Just like what was happening with America in the West with a lot of their aspects of free market and the stock market. I mean, if you look after the 1900s, the West unanimously just completely adopted America's financial system, almost completely mimicked it, and across almost the entire West. And this thing has been happening for a while, and now instead of it being our system, it's going to be this Bitcoin system, because it provides wealth to more people, including the rich, including the poor, and it will incentivize people to work more and provide more resources, because year over year, it goes up every year, right? Bitcoin has never had a down year, which means that it is a astonishing investment. Like if you were to put $100 in Bitcoin 2 years ago, it would have went up. 4 years ago, would have went up. 5, 6, 7, 8. From the beginning of Bitcoin's history, it has never gone down in year over year. There's no other asset that has gone through that. We're almost in, I believe, 12 years now of Bitcoin, and it has performed perfectly. The blockchain has not collapsed. There has not been major breaches of security. It is a immaculate, as the guy from Jordan Peterson's podcast says, immaculate conception that this system of currency has been going 12 years, and it has never gone down and has only gone up and has only become more efficient. I mean, to not adopt that is to ignore future success for your country, as far as I'm concerned.
And I would agree with you, because, I haven't seen, yes, it's gone up and down, but to me, the market goes up and down, so value goes up and down. I just want to highlight one interesting thing that people may not know that she didn't say, but if you look a little bit, you can find it, is destabilizing countries. Well, Hillary, I think you definitely destabilized Libya openly. You laughed about Gaddafi dying, who in my opinion was actually a fairly decent leader, everything I've looked into. And you tried to destabilize Syria. Luckily, Russia stepped in, which she criticized, but she even said we got to destroy Syria for the pipeline or Israel or whatever. So, I mean, she destabilized 2 countries, voted for the war in Iraq. So you could probably say 3 if you want. And I think we'd all agree here, maybe me and Eric can have a debate on how military should be structured. I don't think we'd agree I don't think anyone here would agree that military adventurism for natural resources or destabilizing countries is anyway a good thing. Anyway, you want to see the video, me and Dan watched it, so cue it up here. Let me know if you can't hear it.
And then one more area that I hope nation states start paying greater attention to is the rise of cryptocurrency. Because what looks like a very interesting and somewhat exotic effort to literally mine coins in order to trade with them has the potential for undermining currencies, for undermining the role of the dollar as the reserve currency, for destabilizing nations, perhaps starting with small ones, but going much larger. So when we think about this new environment in which we find ourselves that we've been discussing for the last some minutes, we can't just think about nation states.
You know, if there is someone,
we can't just think about nation states, guys. Okay, I'll admit, I actually think about dividing nation states into multiple states and going even further than that. So completely the opposite. But I find it funny. I don't think she knows anything about this. Mining coins to trade them, you can just buy them and trade them. It's funny. What it shows to me here is the elites really are losing complete touch of everything, if you're being honest. And that's why they're showing their teeth, so to speak, is because their old system's crumbling. They have no way to enforce it anyway. It's like an attack dog who lost his teeth. To me, that's kind of what these people are. They're just like, oh, we're angry about cryptocurrency. We're angry people are not following, so we're just going to put the hammer down. So speaking of that, I do want to I know I talked about this again. I love your opinion. History seems to repeat itself in a very crazy way, as Eric July said. I agree with that. So if you haven't taken a look, you say, like, why is Austria a big deal? I live in America, or I live in another European country. I get that. But that doesn't mean they won't try that here. Just like they won't, they wouldn't, give a second thought about trying something that they're doing in other parts of the world, specifically Australia. But Austria infuriates a lot of people with full lockdowns, as Germany warns it may follow suit. Now, one thing I'm going to mention here, actually, before getting into the article, is the World Health Organization, which I am not a fan, which I say we should be completely away from. Don't want anything to do with them. Even said, don't do this. Stop lockdown. Like, this isn't working. Like, stop. Which, to their credit, I'm not siding with globalist institutions, but when they're correct, they're correct. Like when the UN says Yemen's the worst humanitarian disaster, I'm like, okay. But so Austria imposed, basically, they're the first country in Western Europe to throw a full COVID-19 lockdown, and Germany said it might follow suit with that. There's also a few other countries that are talking about it. Austria said, in addition to the lockdown, would require the whole population. The whole population. This isn't like, oh, I work in healthcare, or I do this, or I work with this, to get a medical procedure from February 1st. Both decisions are infuriated many in a country where skepticism about state mandates affecting individual freedoms runs high, encouraged by the far-right party, the third biggest in parliament. What did they say about it? We've not succeeded in convincing enough people to get it. Chancellor Alexander Schallenberg, I believe I'm saying that right, told a news conference saying the lockdown would start Monday and require everyone to get this medical procedure. It hurts that such measures have to be taken. Well, if it hurts, why are you doing it? But I would ask, but they asked if Germany could rule out an Austrian-style full lockdown, saying we're in a situation now. We're in a national emergency. Oh my God. This sounds so V for Vendetta. Like, if you've ever watched that, like the Chancellor Sutler, like, without us, what would they do? And I'll just say, fresh set of lockdowns comes as optimism grows about the experimental drugs developed by Pfizer, Merck, I'm not familiar with them, that cut the chance of hospitalization and full illness. And he's saying we expect targeted measures against Rona across some countries, mainly according to health situation, but other factors such as domestic political situations will be relevant. And while it might take a while before political consensus can be reached in other countries, it's clear that the tide has turned. This is a long article, so I'm not going to get into the huge, portion of every small detail. What I want to make clear is, ironically, this is starting in Austria, but this could go over the world. And what did they say? If you just fall in line, if you just get this thing, if you just do this procedure, you'll be okay. And then they just turn around and say, I don't really care if you got it. Everybody gets it. Not because for a while here, it was like, okay, 100 employees, I think. And then this regulation, I'm sure Aaron Joyce, there's probably stuff in Ireland they're pushing. And then eventually they just, I think at one day say, everything's locked down. Everyone has to get it. Now, I'm curious, two things. One, do you think they'll get away with enforcing that everybody has to get it? And two, how do you think we prevent stuff like this from happening anywhere else? Because I hate the argument when people say it just can't happen here. Like there's some magical thing. And I get it. The U.S. has guns, but still.
Well, that would be that's a great question. Like for us here in Ireland, I'm unfortunately going to give you a cliche answer, but with a fact, and that is it won't happen to me. That I will go to jail. I will absolutely never ever ever take or administer a vaccine or let anyone administer a vaccine to me. That is my choice. I don't want it. I have bodily integrity. I am entitled to do that. I'm entitled to make that call, and I'm doing that. And I'm standing by my right to do that. I encourage, and I nearly get to the point of advising my people in Ireland to be disobedient, to literally be disobedient. I didn't say go out there and break every law in the country. I didn't say go out there and be a bad person. But there has to be civil disobedience. The people have to say no. This is not, acceptable that we live in a tyrannical regime. This is what the people of Ireland live in my belief, at present, under the government, under current guidelines and restrictions being implemented by them. This is not a country that's living with a democracy in place at present. There is a minute section of government making a lot of decisions, and dare I say it, they're unelected officials. The government, as I referred to earlier on, is three separate parties gone into more or less a coalition, call it what you will, together, and they are pushing that. But your question, what can we do? Civil disobedience, and yes, I know we will not. I have many friends and members of my party who I know for a fact would stand in solidarity and would absolutely be staunch in stance against having to administer a vaccine, a mandatory. I'm absolutely all about choice. If somebody wants the vaccine, have it. I don't, and I'm entitled not to have it. The solutions are, where do we go from here? I'm very worried. In my country, I do believe that, unfortunately, if they do push forward with lockdowns, if they do make it mandatory or take away privileges or human or civil rights from the people of Ireland, I suppose as incentives or as threats, I suppose not incentives, to take this thing, I would be very worried about what may take place in my country.
Yeah, and that's the thing that we want to avoid. Like, how can we? Because I get like a lot of people say, like, yeah, I am, and civil disobedience to me is the best thing in spreading information. So it doesn't get to a point where it's gone previously in history, where it gets where things escalate. Because we don't want that, especially with today's weapons. I don't think we want to rebuild civilization. I have no interest in that. That's why I do this. Yeah, I enjoy talking politics. I definitely do. But it's not a sideshow enterprise. We want to get somewhere and get the information out so people start waking up and saying, well, okay, I'm just going to say no. I'm just like, the people of Austria deserve better, and they just need to stand up, say no, get rid of this guy, get rid of these people, get rid of all parliament, as far as I'm concerned. And Austria is not a big country, Eric, so maybe you'd be okay with statelessness there. But actually,
one question real quick, Kareem, and you can continue. I'm just curious to know what percentage of their population is vaccinated.
I actually haven't looked that up. I apologize, I didn't do my homework on that, but I can do it. I can ping you that real quick. Just more to me, I don't know. I can look that up real quick.
So
in Ireland, Daniel, just for your information, the propaganda mainstream media news are claiming about 95%. To me, that is impossible.
Yeah, I don't know how much I trust, because Pennsylvania said a certain number, like 92%, and then they said 90. I don't know how they're tracking this. Are they just calling up pharmacies like, how many dudes got this? Like, yep.
So I have probably an opposite view on how to tackle these mandates than y'all. I'm in the military. I'm required to have the vaccine. It was before it was mandated anywhere in America. Any mandate or anything, I had to get it to stay in the army, because when you kind of sign away your freedom, because it is a volunteer army, we're not being conscripted like in Russia or Israel. We acknowledge that we sign away our freedoms. We're bound by another constitution as well, called the Uniform Code of Military Justice. So
Say that again, Eric.
Uniform Code of Military Justice, UCMJ. And
so sorry to interrupt you, but does that constitution supersede the constitution of your country?
Yes.
That constitution supersedes the constitution of your people, of your country that you're defending and fighting for.
Yes.
Seriously.
Yes.
Worrying. Very worrying.
That seems because you take an oath to defend one thing, but then you have to follow from another.
Well, if you think about it, the military, historically speaking, has almost always been out of bounds when it comes to the Constitution. It's like our founding fathers said, when it comes to almost everything other than war, which is one of the only times where we grant the president a large sum of powers that he can wield. And the military has almost always been this way. And it's always been a sort of separate entity to the government. And one of the ways that you can kind of look at this is that you have, the civilian population and the non-civilian population. There's a differentiation. Now, do I think that the military should be treated differently than general people in the civilian world? Absolutely. I think it's a different organization and it's a different life. You're living a different life. And as Eric pointed out, which I think is very beautiful because most people just kind of forget about it, is that it is a voluntary service. You're not being forced, unless there's a draft, but there hasn't been one of those in a while. And you are not being forced to join the military. You're not being coerced to join the military. Maybe persuaded, maybe influenced, fine, sure enough, whatever. But you're signing your rights, not necessarily away, but you're signing your rights into a different organization to where you have to be beholden to more laws, more rules, and more regulations. So I think that while I'm not fully versed in what that is, what is it again? Say it one last time.
UCMJ, Uniform Code Military Justice.
Yeah, Uniform Code Military Justice. I'm not versed in that, and obviously Eric could talk about it more. But I think there should be a different code, like some sort of different rules that they have to abide by that would be different than civilized law. I'm not so sure about the idea that document or doctrine can completely supersede the Constitution in all cases. I'm just not so sure if even making that presupposition, and I'm not sure who made that presupposition, so I'm going to ask you. I don't know the history of that. So if you could delve into it more, I just think that I'm just not so sure about that,
So I can give some examples of how it does supersede. For example, freedom of religion, freedom of practice. If the military grants a lot of privileges to people of certain religions, like Sikhs, they don't have to shave, they can grow their hair out. However, if your religion does not help at all with the military or with your unit or anything, they can say, hey, you can't practice that. You can't do that.
Seriously?
You can't. Yes, you can't. They will accommodate reasonably, is I think the exact verbiage is, they will reasonably accommodate for your religion. However, the military supersedes all in the military.
Okay.
Right. I just have a small point to make on that, and just may I quickly say, you should be very proud of what you're doing. I'm sure you're very proud to be serving in the United States forces, and the very best of luck to you in doing that. You should be very proud and well done. But what I will say on it is just this. Like, we were discussing elitism earlier on, or what form of elitism is. So isn't this no more or less just a clear definition of it taking place right in front of us? Where I'm struggling with this now as a country who's fighting for freedom, as a country who has fought for freedom, as a country who's continuously doing it, as a republic, where that constitution or a document, or I suppose, we just say the constitution or a document, and we all say, I'm fighting for my people, I'm fighting for myself, for my children, for my country. And I'm going to join a unit, battalion, an army, whatever. And I'm going into that. And all of a sudden, to join this, I accept as well, Kareem and Daniel made a great point that that's on a voluntary basis. But I dare say so, 85, 87% of the world's armies are. I'm well aware that there are some countries at 16 and at 17 years of age, it's automatically you're drafted in. But the point I'm making, I want to fight for my people, my country, my family, my children, etc., and my constitution and what my people believe in. And then I join an army that's doing that very thing, protecting, fighting for my people, etc. And then I'm saying, hold on now a minute. I'm signing a document, which I obviously have to sign, I assume. I'm signing a document and I am joining an army, having built up that passion, that pride, and that the want to do that. And then, forgive me for saying so, but for the use of, not ranting on, you're more or less, I'm not saying you yourselves, Eric, but you're more or less then drafting that to the side and picking up the new document and going, well, I'm going this way, or I'm sticking to these rules, and I'm different, or I'm, you get where I'm going. I don't want to rant, but I'm different to these, or what I first believed or what I'm fighting for is changing, and my policies are kind of different. At the Irish Freedom Party, we have a party constitution, but our party constitution obviously doesn't cross over or have a problem with our own constitution. Actually, one of the biggest things in our party is fighting and speaking about and educating others about our constitution. So for me, as an individual, I won't bring it being an Irishman into it, but for me as an individual, hearing that, not only is it massively eye-opening, it's educational, but I'd have to say concerning.
So I want to dive back into the COVID, the whole COVID mandates and how civil disobedience. I know I kind of brought us onto a tangent about that. My opinion on civil disobedience has definitely shifted to not civil disobedience. And what I mean by that is we can look in America last year, for example, the riots, the protests, burning down city blocks. And these areas, the police in a lot of areas just allowed it to happen, allowed these things to happen, and results came about. Results happened. But when people do civil disobedience now in America, at least this is my view on it, is it's no longer getting anything done. And I think when one party is allowed to do something differently for their ideologies and their views, and they are allowed to go rampant on the streets, maybe it's time we have allow the other side to do the same. Not allow, but maybe it's time for the other side to wake up and see that this is how things are getting done. We've been civil about this, and nothing has happened in favor of us. Nothing has happened for our voices. I'm not saying it should happen, but
you're saying that it seems to be that one side can get away with violence and the other can't.
Well, I don't think one side has attempted enough violence to get away with it, is what I think.
So here, I actually want to touch on that because it's a very, what you said was very profound. And I don't think you're calling for violence, but here's what I think you're saying. So there's this game, there's like micro games in this big game, but at the end of the day, there's this large scale game that's going on in the United States. And certain people play the game by the rules and traditions that were installed for years, right? The game has a manual with it. And there's a certain set of people who follow by those rules in that manual. But then you have another side who threw the manual out, cut it in half, burned it on fire, and said, fuck the game. I just want power, right? So there's this side who are power hungry and they want to again, impose their will on other people. They want to be authoritative in their speaking. They don't want free speech. They want their speech. They don't want freedom of expression. They want their expression. They don't want freedom of choice. They want their choice. They want the world to conform to their views. So, right, the world is doing this thing where it's constantly coming in conflict with what they believe. And because it's very hard to change that, what they try and do is do things to get others to conform to them, to then make it seem like the world is conforming to their ideology or political belief, religious belief. In this sense, it'd be more ideological, as you said. But what I think is, and I think you're wrong, but I think you're right. I think you're right in the sense that the left has been very violent, and there haven't been a sufficient amount of consequences to match the violence, right? The output in violence rendered to the consequences of all that violence was not even relative to the other party. I will agree with you on that. And I will agree with you, the media does not cover left-wing violence, and when they do, it's mostly peaceful, right? So I agree with you, there's a bias in the covering of the violence. But what I will disagree with you is in the sense that, okay, yes, the mainstream media is going to cover, but they're a very small percentage. Like even Anderson Cooper, who was had the highest key demo, you're talking 222,000 people, right? That's nothing. Joe Rogan gets 11 million viewers per podcast. That's a legitimate statistic. So you have one man who's quadrupled what the mainstream media is getting. But we all know that they're going to protect the left. We all know that they're either not going to cover or whitewash things. But at the end of the day, among the general populations, and if you want to, Kareem, you can pull the civics poll up. Black Lives Matter, as soon as the 2020 riots happened, approval rating for BLM dropped by like 15%. In fact, right now, it's at the lowest it's ever been and since it was a thing, right? So among the general population, the riots and the over $2 billion in property damage that happened over the summer discredited BLM and Antifa exponentially. It discredited them to the general population. Now, the media, nothing's going to change. They're a brick wall and a stone wall. They're a propaganda outlet. But the general population, as the polls are showing, have now stepped away from BLM and have realized that they're a violent organization. And then when you look on and see their ethos and it says destroy the nuclear family and implement equality of outcome, well, a lot of people are now turned off by that. And I think the movement got hijacked. And the majority of people, when you tell them this is what BLM and Antifa has done and is doing, they'll stray away from it. So I think the problem is, and you had some Antifa members, while they usually get out and don't get bail, you've had people that got arrested. Now, there was not enough people arrested. There were people who were let out, but they were discredited a lot after that. Now, the right has to follow a much more stricter set of rules. Because what happens when you go to D.C. and you just simply step, let's just say, 10 feet from the Capitol property? Well, now you're a insurrectionist. But when you go and burn cars and you've recently got out of a mental institution for molesting 5 children and anally penetrating them, and you attack this individual, well, you're now a hero. You were a victim, right? So they have to follow by a different set of rules. But I believe that even though we have to follow this way stricter set of rules, I think the idea that, okay, fuck this game, let's just destroy it as well. I think that that's also a very, very toxic way of looking about it, because one day that maybe this game isn't even supposed to happen. Maybe this game is not the proper game to be playing. But to be clear, the majority of the board is made up of the left, meaning that they dominate the institutions, right? So what's going to happen when we get out of, not that I'm, part of the right or conservative, I'm not a member of the Mises Caucus, but when you fight violence with violence and one side has the institutions and media on their side to cover it, well, you're always going to be the violent insurrectionist, Nazis, white supremacists. But what happens if you do what MLK did and get beat and get smacked and get hit and get shot? Well, guess what? It sucks. People are going to get hurt. You're going to feel pain physically and metaphysically. But at the end of the day, when those cameras went on in Birmingham and everyone across the country saw what was going on there and no one hit back, what happened? there was a mass outcry for a relinquishing of these Jim Crow rights and for this to stop immediately. You had thousands of people coming across the country to the South to protest along with African Americans. And I don't think if those African Americans, when those officers would have crossed that bridge, if they would have attacked them with weapons and beat them up, I don't think the same result would have happened, at least not at that time frame. So I think it's easy to resort to, okay, fuck it, let's just destroy the game. But at the end of the day, we have more integrity than that. We're better than that. And we have more morality than they do. And we should see it as a virtue, not a inhibitor, just because of the way the media covers it. Like, we don't need the media on our side because we have something the left doesn't have: motivation and entrepreneurship, right? So guess what? They're going to keep, sort of degrading into their own institutions. Meanwhile, we have guys on the right or the libertarian-esque side who are building institutions, who are making media platforms. Look at Elon Musk. I'm not saying he's inherently a right-winger, but I could easily see him and a lot of other people making their own platforms. Look at Tim Pool. Look at all these guys. When they ban us, we find a way to get back on. When they censor us, we keep speaking. So we're very innovative, which the left is not. They just regurgitate and re-espouse what they've heard. So I think at the end, it's very hard to look long term. But I think I see a light at the end of the tunnel. But I get where you're coming from. To simplify, sorry for the long-winded answer.
That's fine. One thing I've looked at, we can look at things that have happened in history, and I'm not gonna say anything negative about MLK or anything because I completely agree with that, completely. However, we can look at things in more recent. For example, I don't know if any of y'all know about the Bundy Ranch situation that happened in, I think it was like 2014, where these farmers, BLM, not Black Lives Matter, the Bureau of Land Management, was trying to put forth eminent domain, take property away from these farmers. And the amount of people that showed up ready for shots to go off, the amount of people who were wanting the shots to go off in support of the Bundy family, the BLM stopped even trying to take their farm and ceded that they could keep their land because people who are willing to fight for what they believe
That's
in,
a good point. That's a good point.
They're willing to do that. It provides change. I'm not the type, and I'm not saying we should do this. This is just my view on it. I'm not a right winger. I'm not a left winger. I'm me. I'm an independent. I make thoughts for myself, make decisions for myself. But when the right is doing certain things in a certain way, I'm not calling for them or even saying they should do it the same way and the same type of violence as the left has been doing. I'm saying they should be more using their rights, for example, with the Second Amendment for against tyranny. It's when the government is becoming tyrannical, it is our duty as citizens, civilians, not me, y'all, to use your Second Amendment to protect your freedoms when your government clearly doesn't care about your freedoms.
Right.
That is what it is in our Constitution for, is to stop them from having that power. Yes. So I'm more calling for us to I'm more saying that the right needs to use
not just grovel. Like they're like, okay, we're gonna spank you. Oh, okay. And they're gonna go into their little right-wing shell and they're just gonna hide out until the left literally dominates everything. And at the end of the day, Obama's going to be president of the world. No, I'm being a little hyperbolic. But like, yeah, I get what you're saying, that when Democrats fight, they break shit and push forward. And when Republicans fight, they get pushed back and they go into their little shell and then they stop. So absolutely, people need to be bold, brave, and push forward, even in the name of conflict. And one thing I want to say, just a funny thing real quick. I want your guys, someone commented in my chat. I don't know if you can check it, but he said, hey, can you fix your mic? It's only coming in from my right ear. Wouldn't that be a problem with his headphones or my?
I think that'd be with his headphones.
Yeah.
I was like, wait a minute.
But actually, since you brought up the right, I actually have a fundamentally different opinion is, well, the left and the right kind of work together. So the best way is to say, hey, I'm not going to smash your game by using violence. I'm not even going to use violence against you, but I'm going to opt out of the whole game and play my own, regardless of that thing. And I know that people say, well, China. I'm like, well, you know what? I'll live with that. If states break apart, or if countries break apart, I'm cool with that. I did want to bring up Youngkin, though, because we're talking about the right. I kind of get Daniel's opinion. Really interested. So Youngkin said he's not going to try and block local mask medical procedures like other Republican governors. So Youngkin said he will not mandate masks and these procedures, but unlike some Republican governors, he will not attempt to block localities from implementing their own requirements. Localities are going to have to make decisions the way the law works. That is going to be up to individual decisions. But again, from the governor's office, you won't see any mandates from me. And clarify that in a one-on-one interview.
Well, did he say whether or not it sounds like he's not being clear. Now, I know that Biden's vaccine mandate now has got pushed back in the courts and it's not going on. OSHA suspended it. But did he say, was he clear if there was a national mandate, if he would abide by that and if he would institute that mandate? Or was it just like he's not going to mandate, but he'll let other counties and cities do as they wish? That's what it sounds like, right?
That's my interpretation. Now, he's talking about this after, Greg Abbott just banned it outright. And despite being, now people described him as like against this by critics, but Youngkin actually said he's a staunch supporter of it. He said he got it. His family got it. He thinks it's the best way to protect themselves. And the interesting thing, now there's other thing here for like marijuana sales and gas prices. I'm not super worried about those two things. We could discuss them also in another show, but I just kind of want to get your opinion. I think this is the biggest one. This is the big one.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe I should be.
No. I think you're absolutely right. But here's the deal.
What do you think?
And there was this question that got raised to me and I think many others at the Rittenhouse trial, right? When the judge banned MSNBC from ever entering the facility, the building, being on the property or the grounds ever for the rest of the trial. Now you could say, well, they had a reporter that did some malevolent things. And I'm like, well, I'm not so sure if one reporter out of a massive news organization justifies a courtroom to ban that whole organization, because at the end of the day, even though it's not fair, we should still have a free and fair press. Like, we should still have the press be able to cover things like that. And I was kind of at like conflict. I was like, well, yes, the reporter did something obviously bad, but I'm not so sure if the proper reaction was ban the whole organization from coming. Not that I love MSNBC. So it's the same thing with this. It has to do with central planning and decentralization. Okay, so obviously there becomes a limit where whether you're in power or whether you're just down the street, you see someone getting shot at and they're on the ground, you want to go and save them, right? It doesn't matter if they're across the street. It doesn't matter if they're black, white, gay. You want to save them. You want to stop them from hopefully not dying. Now, when it comes to the state government and local governments underneath it, okay, if he's not implementing any mandates, if he's not putting any sort of vax, mask, and all that stuff, that's good and all. But the question really becomes, okay, so if local governments, which I haven't seen much of, I want to say this, like there's been certain counties in other states, but really here it's been more by state. Like I haven't seen a lot of different cities. I haven't been to every city in Virginia, but most of the cities are doing what the state guidelines are, right? We haven't had like Virginia Beach is super, totalitarian and tyrannical. It's pretty much all been whatever Northam said, and let's continue this. So I don't think there's going to be a lot of localities and cities implementing these mandates. But if there is, from a constitutional standpoint, from a legal standpoint, what I'm asking you personally, because I kind of want a second opinion on this. Do you think that he would have it would be his duty to ban a mandate from other city governments? Because isn't that why we have this vertical decentralized system of state, city, county, like this is why we have it in this order. So yes, the state can't do too much, but the city can't do too much, and the county can't do too much, where we have all these separation of powers to limit the ability to control one area or one country for that matter. So I don't know from a legal standpoint, technically, and I've this is why I critiqued Abbott and what's his name from Florida, DeSantis, because I'm not so sure about it. I don't know if it's justified, even with something like this. I'm just not so sure. I haven't come to the point. Okay, yep, boom, that's for sure. I think when it comes to governor edicts, I think the edicts in general are completely unconstitutional, right? Since when in our Constitution did it make room for suspending amendments under the name of a virus? I don't see it anywhere. You tell me. War, that's definitely the case with a lot of situations. War, but you had this. You literally had the disbarring of the First Amendment. You had churches, people who couldn't go to church, who could not worship in their own church. You had businesses shut down, the pursuit of happiness shut down. You had multiple amendments crushed, right? So I just don't know how much legal grounding that governors have to completely ban what all counties and cities do.
I'll give you my opinion on that. I don't think they should have grounding, or they should do it. And I understand where DeSantis is coming with the fines. I understand where Greg Abbott is coming in with the bans. For me, I would be more in the side of, aside from them, I don't think there's an inherent duty that he should go legally thing. I think he should de-incentivize them to do so. And we'll see if he does. I'm just kind of curious. I was just kind of curious what he was going to say and do on this topic. And I kind of wanted to bring it up to you and just be like, hey, this is where we're at. I'm not actually like criticizing him, so to speak. I'm just saying, hey, this is kind of where it's at. I don't think the state should supersede the local. I don't think the federal should supersede the state. So I even say the criticisms of Abbott and DeSantis are warranted in some way. So that's my opinion of that. Not going to go on that for super long. We'll say, going back to Europe, Italy is also considering doing a lockdown for the people who have not taken this procedure, and that was on November 18th. Hopefully not. Hopefully they do not do it. There seems to be a little bit of hope in Europe, actually. Credit to Eric for this one. So shout out to you. Shout out to Eric for telling me about Eric. Whether that's funny or not, I'll let you guys decide. But Eric Zemmour, I do not speak French very well, so just put up with me. Basically, what I'm seeing is a lot of people are calling him the far right, calling him like a Donald Trump type guy. Seems to be a 60.
What does that even mean anymore?
I don't think.
What does the far right mean? Because like, if we're really going to classify Joe Rogan as far right, then isn't anyone who's not an ultra woke, progressive, super socialist, even socialists have been called far right now. So it's like, what the hell even is the far right?
Nothing. It's just a term. Like, you pick a term to bash somebody with, and in my opinion, you just pick something that sounds bad, and you're like, they're bad things. So you can't argue with it. It's like, I don't want to be part of that. But then you keep calling everybody that. It's like the boy who called wolf. It's like, well, everything's a wolf now, so wolf has no significance. So he's a 63-year-old. He overtook Le Pen. I believe Le Pen is the number one in the Front National party. Correct me if I'm wrong.
You're right.
I'm right. Okay. And then he's number two. So he might not be actually the dude who takes on Macron. It might be, I have a feeling it might be Marie Le Pen again, and she might win. And then President Francos Hollande said he knew that there were bad people infiltrate among migrants coming into Europe, and he made the absolutely criminal decision, they say, to keep borders open. Now, Zemmour has a lot of comments here, like they're saying, well, Trump wanted to build the walls. Zemmour said, like, banning foreign first names, such as Mohammed and Kevin. I don't know necessarily banning foreign first names is the problem. The problem is just an influx of people coming in, get that under control. But he warns of a decline of Judeo-Christian values and under things like the neoliberal framework and stuff. So I would consider him, if you get all these different things out of the way, I would say he's a nationalist. I would agree with some stuff here. I would disagree with some different things. I don't live in France though, so it's hard for me to say, is it being overrun by the Islamic population? Are there problems? How widespread are they? If you I don't know about banning names, but I'm not against getting immigration under control where you can use resources to help your own people. So that's kind of where I'm at, and I think immigration should be done by invitation. So I'm a little bit different, I think, than everybody else. But Eric probably looked at this more than me. So is any of my analysis correct?
Let me comment on some of the things about France and their situation with their immigrants. France has had a couple issues in the past couple of years with immigration. I mean, last year in November, there were multiple beheadings, multiple attacks by Islamic extremists who literally beheaded people in Paris. And the toxicity of a lot of, and I'm not saying Muslims are toxic, I'm not saying any of that. The toxicity of these extremists that have been coming into France has been very loud. France has been dealing with this for a while. I don't know if any of y'all are familiar with the Charlie Hebdo, the Hebdo attack.
I've heard that name. Go ahead and what was that? I feel like I've heard something about that. What is that?
Charlie, yes.
Je suis Charlie. Si. So I actually have the copy of the newspaper that caused. There was a shooting in I want to say 2015 at a magazine, a newspaper organization called Charlie Hebdo, who were completely for free speech, freedom of expression, completely. So what they did, now it was a little antagonizing, but still they shouldn't be killed because of this, is they drew the Prophet Muhammad in their newspaper, and Islamic extremists came to their area and came to their shop, their store, their headquarters, and murdered, I think it was 11 people. And ever since then, there have been a lot of attacks in France, more so than most countries with Islamic extremists in the West. I'm not going to say though.
Really. So when was this attack, this major attack, and what was like the name of the attack again?
So it was, I think it's called the Charlie Hebdo massacre.
The Charlie Hebdo, okay. And
it was basically about a newspaper organization that drew Muhammad, and Islamic extremists came and shot up their. I want to say it was where they printed the newspaper, but they killed the head of Charlie Hebdo, and he in fact
really
post-mortem was released his manifesto. He has a manifesto that was published, and I would implore y'all to take a look at that. It's pretty interesting. But one French author that I think everybody here would probably enjoy reading is a French author named Michel Houellebecq, and his books have basically the word's escaping my mind. He basically was predicting a lot of things that are happening in France. He has a book called Submission that predicts the rise of Islam in France. And it's very interesting to look at because a lot of the things he was talking about in his books, and these are fictional novels, are coming to fruition in France at this moment. And it's very interesting to see that France is becoming less how we would define Judeo-Christianic values. Those are starting to leave.
More secular.
Yeah, more secular. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing or a good thing, but the increase of attacks have been insane. I mean, there was the Nice there's the Nice shooting, or was it Nice? I can't remember. It was at the Bataclan. It was a concert. And there was also the Nice was the truck attack where they ran into a market and killed I think it was at least 10 people.
And all these attacks were by Islamic extremists?
Yes. They're by Islamic extremists. And it's very forgive me, I have a roommate in the Army. We have roommates. He's in the restroom right now. If I don't know if y'all hear that or not, but It's definitely increasing. And I mean, even in Germany, these things have been increasing. And I don't know if y'all know, I'm just starting to state out random things that happened historically in the past 5 years. There was something called Day X in Germany. And what Day X is members of the German equivalent of special forces infiltrated migrant camps and had a plan to take out leaders of political parties, exterminate. They had death squads in these migrant camps who were going to exterminate the migrants. And they got caught because some soldier got caught by police with a firearm in a camp. And they're like, why are you here? They had a plan to completely have a coup d'etat. The special forces, it was, I think, 200 people were arrested for that. And there's definitely a culture clash with the people of the West, and and you have people from the Middle East bringing a lot of their values with you and not assimilating and just trying to but not lose their identity. And I'm not going to blame them or anything, but they're clashing. These areas have been very homogenous for history, and so when you see these cultures clashing, it's causing a lot of conflict, and so it's a very peculiar thing.
So one thing I want to ask you, because you seem pretty versed in this, more so than me. How do you think Afghanistan plays into this? Do you think it has any effect on this at all, exacerbating the problem, or what? Because you got to assume that there's going to be some ramifications after what happened, whether it affects us, whether it affects not us. But go ahead.
So with Afghanistan, most of those migrants are actually coming to the United States, not really Europe per se. There's definitely some coming through. If y'all are looking at the border conflict with Poland and Belarus, there's definitely migrants from that area.
Yes.
But a lot of them came to America, and a lot of them have a lot of messed up morals. They're completely different morality ingrained in their society. I mean, it is acceptable in Afghanistan to have 7-year-old children, boy children, basically be sex slaves, and they're called dancing boys. And my father told me about this. My dad was in Afghanistan. He said the military couldn't do anything about that because it was with the people they were working with in the Afghan government. And there's instances of Afghan men in America who came here as migrants. This happened in Virginia. They had a lot of migrants go to Fort Lee, Virginia, who have been arrested for raping children. And so you have these cultures where that is completely unacceptable. And I don't think it should just be a culture unacceptable. It should be completely unacceptable across the board. You're bringing their morals, because they're migrants. They're not here to assimilate. They left. They fled. A lot of these are refugees. They fled. So they're not dropping their customs out the door. They're bringing them with them. And these customs can be toxic to these cultures that have already had their morality built for hundreds of years.
Well, I think the big separation between the two religions of Muslim, Islam, and Christianity, all those, there's different aspects of both those. There's different compartments that differ more so. But I think one thing, the two greatest things about Christianity that the West predicated itself on, and still the things that we're still very thankful for today, is one of the most famous and, in my perspective, powerful quotes from the Bible, which says, "Render unto God what is God, and render unto Caesar what is Caesar's," which simply like, don't worship those who are unfit to be worshipped. Keep the political in the domain of political, and keep the religious in the domain of religion, right? And also it says, which is a very profound quote in my opinion, but again gets looked over, is trying to think of the exact wording, but you feel free to find it. But you should not, basically, to simplify, you should not have sex with someone you are not married with. Now, in the Bible, it's very vague in a lot of things, but it's very specific in that sentence. And also, you can presuppose that marriage doesn't happen at 13, and you can presuppose that marriage is after a certain time of relationship, right? So there's marriage, which is different from relationships, and just basic dialectic and maybe even intimate relationships. So that sort of presupposes that marriage happens after a certain time, right? It doesn't just, you don't marry at 6 years old. where in the Muslim doctrine, and there's a lot of problems with this. A great guy who documented it, can't think of his name right now, talked about the the basic medieval and early 17th, 16th, and 15th century interpretation of the Quran and of the chakra. I think that's what it's called. The Shakira. I can't remember how to say it. Excuse me. But how people have interpreted it in a certain way, and that interpretation is part of the reason why Islam is the way it is, because from their standpoint, their religion does not make immoral the acts they're doing. So it's to say that they're justified in what they're doing because their religion does not have any inherent, does not come in any inherent conflict with their actions. And also, there's been practices for years and years of having sex with females under the age of 17, 16, right? And even that's almost implicated in marriage and at an early age to not only have a wife, but have a very restrictive relationship with that wife. And this has been going on for years, as you said, Eric, but the problem isn't so much that they're doing this, it's that they're doing it in a new culture landscape, right? Because in their little bubble in Afghanistan, not to say that these things aren't bad there. It's just to say that the culture is more rounded in that way there, right? That's how it is over there. And I'd say the sort of homosexual aspect that you're talking about, I find very crazy. Maybe we can get on that later, but I really think a lot of that has to do with repression, right? Because when there's this cultural equal antagonism against homosexuality and doing acts of that sexually, and when you can even be killed for doing that in these countries, when you're thought of as evil, as a serpent for even thinking in a homosexual manner, I think it makes a lot of sense as to why these people go to Western countries and all those repressions and all those sins that were deemed sinful in another country, which they can now partake in without having to worry about the guise of the state and of people who were slaughter them and persecute them. So I do think that that's interesting, and I think it's, I don't know. Do you think maybe that there will be a sort of integration, or do you think it's always going to be this conflict? Do you think that the two can ever coexist?
Sadly, I don't think they can. And I think it's based around their whole culture is based around their religion. Nothing supersedes, nothing takes over Sharia law. Nothing takes over that. But on the
Sharia. That's what
Sharia.
Yeah, that was the word I was looking for. Sharia.
So Afghanistan, for example, this is how my dad worded it to me: is the dancing boys were pleasure, women were meant for birthing. So it was more of the fact that when you have sexual relations with a woman, there is a purpose for it in their culture. The purpose is not pleasure. The purpose is so
procreation.
Exactly. And so that's why, but I find it also very strange that in their culture, it's okay to have sex with these children who are men, who are male children.
You're saying it's okay over there to have sex with young boys?
Yes, they're 7-year-olds. They're called dancing boys. My dad told me he ran into tribal leaders all the time who had dancing boys, and the U.S. military. My dad said he wanted to kill these people, but he couldn't because they were their allies in Afghanistan, and those were the people that we, like the Afghan government that we put into power. That was them doing that just as much as the Taliban and other tribes. Now, that's acceptable there, but I find it so strange that that's acceptable. However, having a sexual relationship with another grown man, you can be killed for.
Yeah,
you can be killed for. I find that very weird.
That doesn't make much sense.
That's very peculiar, man.
I will say this though.
Wow.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there. I do have some background in this as well. Afghanistan, I can't really speak to as much because that's quite a different culture from what I'm looking at. So have to defer to Eric's expertise on there. Can some people assimilate? I would say maybe. It depends if maybe they won't, but their kids will say, okay, like, oh, I like American values. Same thing with like a lot of people here for their families come over, the parents are stricter. One thing I've seen in Muslim cultures, and I can tell you this because I've gone to mosques and stuff, is the parents are strict. The older people, like my older friends who are Pakistani, are strict, but their kids are like, yeah, Kareem, let's go clubbing, let's go. Like, there's not really a fundamental difference. Now, I will say this. I think it's twofold. In particular in France, where I would say is, yes, there are very bad Wahhabi and extreme interpretations that come out of Saudi Arabia that, in my opinion, don't even not align with the Quran, or just plain out bad. They don't work. They're insane. So I find those to be something that the Muslim community should tackle and should definitely deal with. Also, when it comes to France, I think every country has the right to maintain their own homeland, culture, and everything. And if they need to do that, then immigration should just be done by invitation. Okay, you see you're an engineer, come over here and work here and see how it works. And then if it works well, you can have citizen. That's kind of how I do it, as opposed to wall. I don't know about banning a name specifically, but I will say one thing though, aside, it would help, like, if you don't have people like Hillary, when she's not saying crypto is going to destabilize nations, that she doesn't use NATO and other proxies to also destabilize nations, because that's also my concern is, yes, I agree there should be a handle on extremism, and I'm not necessarily against closing border or saying, hey, only invitation, but let's just make sure we're going to do that we don't destabilize any more countries, and if we can, use resources to help stabilize things there so people there can have a better life like they did personally before. And that would be my solution to it. It's not perfect, but just use the military for defense only.
Yeah, and one thing I want to say about say to that is one of the most fascinating things I've found among a lot of leftists and a lot of liberals. When I say liberals, I'm being more specific, right? Leftists, those people usually love guns, right? The leftists like guns. They like violence. They like protesting, right? Antifa, I would consider a leftist. But a lot of the higher class, arrogant, sort of elitist liberals, it's funny how these people preach policy about open borders, right? It's funny. And why it's funny is that, well, they live in gated communities. They live in an area in which they have borders, tight borders around their community, but yet the community around them is completely open to crime and completely open to new visitors who may have nefarious actions, but they're gated off from the rest of the outside world. It's almost, I'm not even sure if they're doing it in all senses to be that they know that they're being so self-contradictory, that the fact that they live in a gated community and that the so-called immigrants and asylees, as AOC said, who come in from other countries, they're not even going to really affect what they're doing, because their community within a larger community, within a state, within a country, is tightly bordered. Gated community, again, that word. So they're almost arguing for policy that comes in complete contradiction with how they live their own life. There's a reason why Pelosi doesn't live in downtown Chicago or downtown DC. There's a reason why Obama has a 50 million house and he's not living in Chicago anymore. Like, there's a reason why these people don't live in the same areas they claim to be for. They claim to protect. They claim to be espousers of. They claim to be speakers and to be expressing the will of the people. They don't. They know they don't, because they don't even attempt to pretend that they share interests and values with the non-elite, because they completely separate themselves physically from them. So it's one thing to pretend to be close to the middle class and the lower class on a cultural and physical level, but to completely screw it. I'm not even living near you. In fact, I'll live halfway across the country and preach about values for people that I haven't even spent 10 minutes around. In fact, I live in another state, but I'm, declaring certain virtues for the so-called people way, way, way far away from where they are physically and metaphysically. I just think that's crazy.
So I'll give you a perspective on that from what I've heard, and then I will I'll close up the show just to respect everyone's time. So what I've seen actually is they live in gated communities. Generally, people who live in gated communities have enough capital, almost assuming that they can run companies, own companies. They have some type of workforce or labor. So they like it. They want open borders because they can get those people in and have them work at their businesses, restaurants, for a lower wage. So, I love people from Honduras, let them in. And then, hey, he's cleaning my pools. He's doing this. He's working here. He's working there. And okay, fine. You could say invitation. You should be allowed to invite them, but not just have a surge, not just open, if the country can't handle that. And that's the problem is I'm not saying that I'm not closed borders. I'm not completely open borders. I think it should be done by invitation. You want those people from those places, fine. Invite certain people over to help you with your business and the labor. But what I will say is it's contradictory in the fact that, yeah, you live in gated communities and you just want them to pile into the inner cities. No, that's not acceptable. So that's where I kind of draw the line. That's where I draw the line. And also, I don't think any company, any type of organization should get any subsidies at all from the government. None whatsoever, because a lot of these companies get subsidized for bringing immigrants or meeting certain quotas, and then they also do that as well. Like a lot of these quotas for like, I want this many people here, and then, or I want people from this region, and then they fill them up. That's what I truly feel is going on. And if we can stop subsidies, if we can stop corporate welfare, if we can stop giving welfare to migrants completely, do it by invitation, do it by people who, we can actually vet, even if we have to close the borders for a year or two, it's fine with that, but let's do it that way. And I think if you implement school choice and the drug war, we could see a lot more improved things with immigration. And I don't know that for a fact. That's what I've discussed with people among the wall and other solutions. So we will go with that. I do want to thank all of you for being here. Eric, Aaron Joyce, it's always a pleasure. So Eric, if you have anything you want to plug, send me a link now. Do it on Facebook. But I do want to thank everybody again for being here. If you want to find Daniel's podcast, which includes the one we just did here, you can type in Daniel B. That's Daniel, and then the letter B in YouTube. Go ahead and take a look at his channel. Not only does he have episodes we've recently done, but he's done a lot of extensive work in doing a lot of truther work, such as taking a look at Bill Gates, taking a look at Tesla, taking a look at what Fauci's done, even talking about things like the Charlie Kirk and Bosch debate, which was real good on Tim Pool. If you want to get involved, if you're in Ireland, if you're in Europe, if you want to raise awareness, or if you're just in a Western country and you want to see Ireland free again, because that is the point. If one of us is free, if one country is free, but other countries aren't free, then what are we doing? We need to help all of them. So take a look at the Irish Freedom Party, their new party. Their manifesto is the Irish people have no land to call their home, but Ireland. They're against excessive taxation. They're against taking they're for sovereignty. They're against these mandates, democratic change, and government corruption. And Eric, is there anything you want to plug, or where can I find you?
No, I'm good. I'm not very outspoken person, so being here is fine, good enough for me.
Well, thank you for doing this podcast, man. I don't know if I told you guys this, but me and Eric grew up together, went to middle school. I think we even went to elementary school together. So we've known each other for a while. And, you know how when you're kids and things are much different than when you're grown up, like things change dramatically. It's just awesome to kind of see the progression of you, man. And I don't know if you feel the same way about me, but we've just changed both a lot. I used to be a very bad kid. I was bad. I was bullied as a kid. I would bully other people. I was a very bad kid. I can
speak for that. He kind of bullied me in middle school,
Yeah, not a lot, but there were like three incidents I remember.
I remember vividly, but it speaks loudly how people's characters can change, because I very much respect you, Daniel, and I'm very much supportive of you. I bought your book. I'm very much supportive of you. I love to see what you're doing, and it shows as people we can always change, you know.
Absolutely. And I really do appreciate you coming on, and thank you for that.
Yeah. Thank you very much for coming on, and you're welcome back anytime. Thank you very much, as well as Aaron and Daniel B., my amazing co-host. Everyone, this is the Essential Libertarians, giving you the tools for self-governance. Talked about a lot of really great topics. Check us out on YouTube at the Essential Libertarians. We'll also be on Odyssey shortly and Rumble. Have a good night, and I'll see you in the next video.
Good night.
Good night.
Cheers, guys. Take care.